the CEO of Feeding America, Claire Babineaux-Fontenot. Claire has led Feeding America since 2018. Before that, she was on the executive team at Walmart and served as their executive vice president and global treasurer. As everybody knows, Feeding America is the national organization of food banks, now numbering 200 across the country, which we just found out Claire has visited almost all of them. And Feeding America serves food banks by supplying food, granting funds, conducting research, advocating for policies that improve food security and address the underlying causes of hunger. And in the last 5 years, our food bank has received $3 million in grants from Feeding America. That was my applause line, and I'm so glad that you applauded. I know it's early, so, but it's a great pleasure to welcome Claire. We really are grateful for her leadership and thrilled that she's come to visit us in Rhode Island today. Claire. This is apparently your spot.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And one of the things that I hope you'll be able to sense pretty quickly is that I will come without pretense, no veneers. The fact that I have bacon in my teeth right now is a sign of that. I happen to love bacon, so thank you. Thank you for that. But if with your indulgence, I was told that I'd have an opportunity to speak to the people here and to some who I'm not going to be able to see in person today for just a few minutes on the top. And then we might be able to transition to creating an opportunity for me to hear from you, what's on your mind, to engage on any subject that you'd like. But before I do, I thought I'd start by talking about my journey here. And I don't just mean the journey that included a flight that I was struggling to figure out, did we land before or after midnight? But more like the journey when I got my rental car and then drove after midnight into Providence, where I have the benefit now, upon my return to this beautiful state, to see the state, as I mentioned to Andrew, with new eyes. To have a chance to be here in this job is simply remarkable. Because there's another kind of journey I've been on. One that I'll date back to sharecropper grandparents for whom English was not a first language, who did not have the privilege of one day of formal education, and of course, who were brilliant. Parents who had the personal capacity to be mom and dad to 108 children, including the very, very privileged me, and who did not have an opportunity to graduate high school. I think about that journey and how it informs why I want to be here, and what I consider the most important part of my trip. If you don't know already, and I hope you already knew before I landed last night, this morning, is that what you do, while on the one hand it's really, really big, on another hand, it's so small. It includes little children, one at a time. Children like me. Children who, among the things that they addressed, and even I think in a way more tragically their parents addressed, was not having enough to eat. Seniors, I was talking about, I'm getting pretty good at those boxes, but that apple juice can get awfully heavy after you've been doing it for a while. But seniors who, in communities like this one, don't have to make impossible choices. They don't have to decide, am I going to eat or pay my light bill? Am I going to eat or get my medicine? Wow. I want you to know that what you do is intensely personal. It's really an investment. In fact, you make many, many, many investments. And I think many of you have the opportunity to go out into your communities and engage directly with people who are being impacted by your work. But one of the reasons that I feel so honored is because I'm one of the people who has benefited from work like yours. Most of my siblings have benefited from work like yours. And without the investments that were made in me, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have this privilege. I wouldn't have this honor. So the most important thing that I do when I come to communities is to say thank you. And sometimes it takes a while. So I like to do it at the beginning when I can, because I've got a little bit of real estate here and then everybody's going to have to go back to work. So my thank you will start there on camera with everyone who will see this. Thank you. Whatever it is that you did, however you did it. Not only the things that you did when people were watching, but maybe even especially the things you did when you did not think they were. It matters. Your nation is grateful. Your neighbors are grateful too. But I want to say thank you to each of you who are in this room, and that's the part that sometimes takes a while, but I appreciate your indulgence, Andrew. I'm so excited. I get the impression that some of the people who are in here that I'm thanking work in the warehouse. Is that right? I'm going to get a chance to tour the warehouse soon. Woo! I do love touring warehouses. One of the reasons, and some truck drivers in here, raise your hand if you work in the warehouse or you drive a truck. Amazing, amazing. I don't know if you heard before I came, but that I won't leave unless I get a chance to say thank you to people who work in warehouses and who drive those trucks. And you know one of the reasons why? I'll give you two reasons. I imagine that if my dad, hardworking, dedicated person that he was, if he got a chance to work in a food bank like this, that the place he probably would have worked would have been in the warehouse. I hope we would not have put him driving a truck. That man could not drive. I think maybe safety record on the road might have informed the decision not to hire my father. But I'd like to think that if he had a job, it would have been in one of these warehouses. So one of the reasons that I say thank you, especially to people who work in the warehouses and drive trucks, is because I think it's one of the ways I can honor who my father was. A second reason is because in the middle of a global health pandemic, when all of us were seeing pictures, every time you turned on the television, there was sometimes a number that kept going up on the screen, and the number would say how many people have contracted COVID, and unfortunately, tragically, how many people have died. And I'm curious, how many people who work in warehouses could do their jobs remotely in the middle of the pandemic? So no matter what that meant, and then what about driving a truck? I think technically you can't drive the truck inside of your house, and therefore you were out there. My goodness gracious. And I was out touring food banks, going into communities during the peak of the pandemic, and it hit me, oh my goodness, what dedication is required to do this work no matter what it means. During that year, I said you're a part of something big and you're a part of something small. Every little kid, every elder, every person who sometimes are referred to as ABOTs, let their bodies be ready and able then by having all the food that it needs, the nutrition that it needs to be able to go out and get that job. Every person, individual matters. But in 2020, anybody want to help me figure out how many people turned to the Feeding America Network in 2020 in need of resources? You want to try? Would 1 million be a lot of people? That would be a lot. 10 million would be more than 1 million. 20 million would be double 10. I'm just doing math for my old math teacher. She's proud of me today. I'm getting the math right. It's not 20 million or 30 or 40 or 50, 60 million people in the middle of a global health pandemic. Do you remember there were supply chain issues? People were having trouble getting access to food. Remember empty shelves? And what did you do? What did this network do? One person at a time. You know how many meals we provided? Now, I'm going to do it again, show you that I learned my math pretty well in Opelousas, Louisiana. Okay, so 100 million. Now that would be a lot of meals, right? And 200 million would be more than 100 million? Again, double. Yeah, okay, I'm getting that right. What if I told you that it was more than that? In fact, that it was more than 1 billion meals. In fact, it was more than 2 billion meals. I got a wow out of the first one. Do I get a wow wow? Wow wow out of that one. More than 3 billion? That was your cue for wow, wow, wow. Okay. There we go. Woo! And more than 4, more than 5, more than 6, 6.7 billion meals to 60 million human beings in the middle of a global health pandemic. My most important responsibility when I come to communities is to say thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you. I'm probably almost, if not at, my 10-minute mark. So let me say thank you for something else. 2 other somethings, and they're kind of related. Thank you for Andrew. A round of applause. So, for all the reasons you know, and maybe a couple you're not as aware of, as busy as all of you are, and he has a full-time job, right? He was 100% employed. Before we embarked upon, as a network, a transformational contract, the likes of which no federated network. Federated network just means we have about 200 independent 501c3s and then a national organization. I'll give you a different translation. I'm not the boss of him. That's what that really means. I'm your partner and not your boss. And the other food banks are your peers, not your boss. But people who care about people care about people. People like you understand that not only should you care about your territory, but that people who come to your territory in need of services They don't care about your territorial boundaries at all. New England is not that big a section, and people move in and out of it all the time. And they don't check their hunger at the border, the boundary line of the counties that you serve. Well, you act like a man who knows that, Andrew. You found time to participate in one of the subcommittees for the contract task force. And the work that you decided to do is going to get me to the last couple of things that I want to talk about, which is you acknowledge, and your biggest contribution among many contributions on that task force was to help us stop measuring our worth exclusively in terms of pounds. Now think about that. Pounds are easier to measure though, right? But is hunger that easy? It's nuanced and complex. So just help me with this, I'll ask you, ma'am, just because you happen to be standing next to me. Which do you think is heavier? Let's see. A bag of spinach or a 2-liter bottle of soda? Let's see. If we only measure pounds, wouldn't we do a better job through that measure to actually not have any food in here? Let's just fill it up with 2-liter bottles of soda. No. Now, although that was the constant measure, people like you never actually made it the only one. But in many important ways, you only got funded, acknowledged, recognized, celebrated based upon that measure. That was an imperfect measure. It should be a data point among data points. The other thing I'll say about that is it promotes efficiency, but not necessarily effectiveness. I am not a food banker and I never will be. But I can tell you, if you want to cut back on freight cost, so gasoline, labor, et cetera, okay, just open up the doors up here and just let people come in and give them 2-liter bottles of soda. That's very efficient. Is it effective? No. But you know what people like you do? You go to the farthest reaches of your county. And that is a very inefficient thing to do. You go to places where people don't have transportation, where they can't get here. You go to them through agencies like yours. You take up the whole, is it the East?
Upper and Lower East Bay.
Wow. And you go to where the need is the greatest. Thank you, Andrew, for helping us to reflect that in how we will measure our success. Thank you for that. And in doing so, we get to the very last point I was going to make. In doing so, we are centering neighbors. Actual people with lived and living experience and expertise with hunger. And that's where it's at. So, America has long been the most generous country in the world. In terms of philanthropy, no nation provides more to philanthropy than we do. No one does. And we should feel good about that. But it reminds me of the self-help industry. You know, the self-help books. If they keep growing, is that a sign that maybe that stuff doesn't work within those books? Because I should just be able to somebody bought a book 40 years ago, it worked, no need for a new book. Philanthropy has always had its heart in the right place, I believe, in this country, but it hasn't had its hands and its head in the right places. We in philanthropy, organizations like Feeding America that have oftentimes, we're positioned to provide grants, as Andrew reflected. We often thought, though we would never have said it, we walked that the people who have the resources must also have the answers. That the most innovative, creative, brightest people are the people with the most money. That's just simply not true. We have made a really important pivot in this network, which is toward working harder than we ever have in our history to listen and learn from people with lived and living experience with hunger. We are a national organization that's really, really big, and in really powerful ways. We're very, very local, and we're very, very small. We are more than ever looking for community-driven solutions to nuanced community challenges. And to do that, we are centering people with lived and living experience. It is critical to the success of this work. At Feeding America, we have something that we talk about is an America where no one is hungry. And there are people who tell me, oh, that's a pipe dream, there'll always be hunger. They're maybe right, but only if we choose for them to be so. Some people tell me there'll always be hunger, I said. They may be right, but only if we choose for it to be so. I'm not talking about will you suffer pain in between breakfast and lunch. I'm talking about generational hunger. I'm talking about people not knowing where their next meal is coming from and not having a bridge that connects them to it. We as a nation can choose for that to go away here. And the work that you're doing is helping to do that, and you're centering on neighbors is where those answers are going to come from. So I go back to my main reason for being here. Thank you each, and thank you all. Thank you everyone who will hear the sound of my voice and potentially see my face. I hope you know that how shall I even put it? There's nothing I've ever done in my life other than having my children and marrying this remarkable man that I've been married to for 36 years and counting. And he actually knew me before we got married and married me nonetheless. Other than that, there's nothing I've ever done in my life that I felt more proud of. That I'm smart enough to hang out with people like you. Wow. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here. Andrew, would you come up here? I have a little something for you. As Andrew comes up, let me explain. I alluded to it earlier. So, the first time I ever had an opportunity to talk to a room filled with food bankers was at the annual conference in 2019. And during that conference, as I was getting ready for the conference, I was so nervous, I was petrified, in fact, because this would be an audience that I care so deeply about. And I want them to feel good about the fact that somebody decided that the former treasurer and executive vice president of finance ought to be the CEO of Feeding America. So I didn't answer that part because I don't know the answer. Why did they choose me? Heaven knows. And yet they did. So here I am standing in front of this group, knowing that there were certain things I would never be. From the moment I started to the last day I was at work in this job. And that was a food banker. I was never going to be a food banker. I would never know what it means to do any of your jobs. I wouldn't know what it means to be on a board of directors for a food bank either. So I was going to be limited in what I could bring. I wasn't going to bring food banking expertise. So I contemplated, but what can I bring? Who can I be? What can I do? And I thought about it long, and I twirled it around over and over in my head, and I thought about what is authentically me, right? What is the embodiment of me at my best? And I was reminded of my roots, which I often call upon, and I'm from where? Louisiana. And in Louisiana, we are big on a certain kind of dish. It's a spicy soup with a beautiful brown roux, if you do it right, called a gumbo. And there's actually a vegetable that means gumbo. This is a smart group, Andrew. Okra. Well, okra is also a symbol. Okra was brought to the United States. Seeds were put in the hair of slaves. I like to think that maybe among those slaves were my ancestors who came here. And they brought this country this wonderful vegetable. They brought with it hopes and dreams and aspirations. And there's a proverb, in fact, that's actually an African proverb, but it's also translated into a Haitian proverb. And it says, "A single finger cannot eat okra." What does that mean? A single finger cannot eat okra. What it means at its essence is that the best things human beings ever do are the things that they do together. Okra is a symbol of partnership. So what I can never come to a community and pretend is that I can tell you how to be the CEO of this food bank. But I think you know how to be the CEO of this food bank. Or to tell people how to be board members. You're doing all right, people. You're doing all right. Tell this team how to do what it does. But what I can do is, I can try to be the very best partner that I can be. So when I visit food banks, I had these made just for food bank visits. Wow. And let's see how smart they really are. So it's a lapel pin. What do you think this is a lapel pin of? Yeah, there you go. Okra.
Nice.
So I leave you, I'm known for wearing pins. I don't know if all of you realize that. But I bring this pen with an acknowledgement. It can be one of two things, Andrew. It could either be just a cheap little piece of tin, or it can be a symbol of my personal commitment and the commitment of your national organization to be the very best partner that we can be. And I'm going to work hard at making it the latter. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.